Most B2B SaaS companies underestimate the operational complexity of billing and invoicing. And as a result, they do hacks and more hacks and more hacks and workarounds, eventually leading to the buildup of commercial debt, that is operational friction, by stacking legacy contracts on top of one another until they eventually stop growing. Hey everybody. So a topic that comes up often in my business is, okay, so we created a great B2B SaaS pricing model, but now we actually need to move it into the operations and creating billing and invoicing flows for that pricing model. So how do we do that? Is there a system we can use? What is your preferred billing system as the pricing consultant and so forth? So I get asked this question about billing and invoicing maybe, I don't know, 10 times a month. And right now, early 2023, it's a really tough question because there isn't actually a really good billing and invoicing system out there for B2B SaaS companies who have any kind of complexity in their deals. So I just want to break down the problem a little bit for you, showcase where I see most people go wrong, what the costs are, and then what you can do about that. Okay, so the key issue here is that you have to take a look at the kind of complexity that you're putting into the market. And this is the complexity in what kind of complexity of product do you have? Do you just have one mono product? So it's just like, I'm going to send you this software solution and we're going to price it. Or is it a tiered product system or with modules and add-ons, or can it even be feature toggled, creating essentially a lot of different product IDs or SKUs, like stock keeping units, if you're in that kind of ERP system, where the complexity of what you're actually selling is quite big. Secondly, the method that you price by can be any combination of transactional fees, flat fees, usage-based fees, which you have to measure something and then tally it up and then bill for it in arrears, or a license fee, so the access to something, and even sort of thirdly, which I've seen nobody solve, is sort of credit systems where I deposit credits into an account and then the credits are then spent on usage. So if you just consider this a range from I just sell one thing, no user base, is just a flat fee per month, to the full-on complexity of very sophisticated enterprise software models with all the bells and whistles. Some systems are good for some of these ranges. And a really good yardstick to measure this by is ACV, annual contract value. So usually software that has an annual contract value of less than $10,000 will also tend to be less complex. So usually with something like this, you can get away with one of these simpler billing and invoicing systems that are already out there. So a lot of startups, 20 plus, try to handle recurring invoicing and billing for everyone, and they have been doing a relatively good job at that. So if you're simple, just go with one of those. Paddle.com is a payment provider that does the whole billing as well. So that's where Profitwell and Price Intelligently, they got bought by those guys. You have others in Denmark. There's Podi.com, and a Google search will do you well. So what you have to figure out is that whatever solution you choose can sufficiently and adequately and completely actually encapsulate the complexity that you're dealing with. Okay. The other end of the spectrum, like the very high end one, is usually where something like Suoro comes in. So Suoro is a do-it-yourself toolbox, essentially. So a lot of things come pre-packaged and you can run a lot of things with it. And it has a lot of integrations already there with Salesforce and a lot of ERP systems and so forth. So for very large scale enterprises, Suoro usually is a good bet. However, often there is so much do-it-yourself and hands-on development and setting up and configuration of a system like that, that it actually almost makes as much sense to do the third option, which is to just do it yourself, which is you have your CM system, you have your ERP system, and then you build something in between, which then function as your billing system. And this billing engine that I see a lot of SaaS businesses, not just startups, but actually also pretty enterprise solutions create, is where you need to focus. And my point is the following. Usually it is sales and product that jointly say, hey, okay, we have a product that we want to sell. So obviously you over in finance now need to invoice it. And these are the rules, and these are the systems, and these are the products, and these are the prices, and so forth, and discounts, and all the complexity. Then finance gets this task of invoicing all of this and essentially has a meltdown because they can see all of the complexity and operational drag that this is going to create. So they, call a timeout and say, okay, so if we have to invoice all of this, then we need to agree on some ground rules because this can get really hairy really quickly, depending on what kind of discounts you give. If you suddenly pull a feature out of something and into something else, or if we have to measure this user-based pricing, how do we do that? We also need to create an audit trail and so forth. So usually this is the point where development now gets pulled in on the side of finance to say, okay, so the development team will then help finance build this billing engine. So they do that. And then at the beginning, the honeymoon phase, everything is fine. Then what happens is that sales and product, they change something, like they build new product, or sales comes up with a brilliant new promotion or discount tactic. So they implement it, like they actually sell something to a customer, say, okay, yeah, so we can build this feature that measures your API calls, and then we'll just charge you, $0.001 per API call, and we're golden. Then this comes back essentially as a scope or feature request to the billing engine. And finance then says, well, you changed the rules. Like we built your billing thing and now you're selling something else, or you're selling the same thing in a different way. So sales and product essentially run with something from a commercial or market perspective that then finance, with the help of development, have to pick up in terms of billing. So this is the conflict that usually is around billing in most SaaS organizations. Essentially, what you have to realize is if it goes unmanaged, it will eventually become a real problem. And it is in a lot of organizations. It is a real problem. So the real problem can manifest in a lot of ways. Either the real problem manifests in the way that you just have chaos in billing, right? And even to the extent that, oh yeah, well, we could build these things, but actually operationally we can't. So let's say we have a right to charge a customer, but we're actually not charging them because we don't have the system set up to charge them. So we're just going to forego that revenue, right? This happens more than you think. Or what happens is that the billing system essentially becomes the source of truth, which means that you're now restricting yourself in the commercial side, saying, well, we can't sell these things, or we won't sell these things, or we won't build these things, or and so forth. I once sat with a global enterprise, like billions in revenue, and they were building a solution for hospitals around imaging. Doesn't matter. And we had a really good pricing model for them, and we could monetize their innovation, their software really, really well. They had a lot of market penetration already with existing solutions that we knew that we could go in and create tens of millions of ARR in year one by pushing this new model into the market. However, they didn't know how to bill it. So at one point in the project, it was a real consideration for the executive team to just charge flat fees that would essentially reduce the revenue of the product to a tenth. So they were willing, because they didn't have the billing operations and engine in place, to forego essentially tens of millions of dollars of annual recurring revenue simply because they didn't know how to invoice it. So this kind of issue exists more often than not. And what needs to happen is that top management, the CEO essentially, needs to, together with the involved group, finance, dev team, sales, product, own the complexity of the product and say, okay, we have two options. One, reduce the complexity that we're pushing into the market, namely we reduce the number of feature toggles and add-ons and modules and so forth that we have, and we reduce the amounts of, let's say, commercial models that we put into the market. So we're not going to get creative with discounts and contract structures and so forth. So we have a complexity over here that we are disciplined with, that we reduce. Okay, so that we fit into whatever billing engine we have. And on the other hand, you turn to finance and development and say, well, you need to actually be prepared to offer these guys some flexibility, right? There needs to be the ability to create some flexibility and complexity in the market. So it's a balance where you say, well, we have some complexity that we want to push into the market, and then we have a capacity for complexity in our do-it-yourself, we build it ourselves billing engine. And these two needs to be weighed. If you, at any point, let's say, close your eyes and just do something that you don't have, let's say, coverage for in your billing engine, that's where commercial debt starts to pile up, right? And this commercial debt will eventually create operational drag where you don't invoice what you actually could invoice, or you don't raise prices where you actually could raise prices, and you don't grow as you could grow. I had a startup that sold for, it was like a half unicorn, but they could have been a full unicorn. This was sort of 2021. They sold. 3 weeks before they sold, we were in a board meeting where everybody agreed that their 600 global enterprise clients could get their prices raised by 80%, but we couldn't do it operationally because all of the contracts were essentially handcrafted for each of these 600 enterprise clients. So there was just a one-to-one system with invoicing every single one of them, and just taking all of that and putting it into one, let's say, new structured discipline system that could handle billing and upgrades and price upgrades for all of these 600 global enterprise clients was just too much work. So the organization just didn't want to do that, so they just sold instead to a large trade buyer who then got the headache of cleaning all of this up. So these guys could have had, I think, like securely could have had a unicorn if they had structured their billing system correctly from the get-go and not piled up that much commercial debt. So this is sort of what is at stake. And really, the biggest mistake you can make is underestimating the problem. Like from a top management perspective, just closing your eyes off what kind of operational drag this will create on the long term if you don't get this balance between who owns the billing engine, which is often finance and with the support of the dev team, and who uses the billing engine or sort of drives the scope of it, which is sales and product. So you need to get these people in a room and get them to agree on a very detailed level, actually, and on a recurring basis, like twice a year or something, to say, okay, so what exactly is it that we want to do on the sales side and the product side, and how should we sort of match this on the billing side so that we're sure that we can move forward with efficiency in our billing. Okay, so this is the situation as is. I know that a lot of startups are trying to solve this on a more sophisticated level than has been the case in the last couple of years. So I'm seeing startups come to me for angel funding or for advice and so forth right now that want to solve sort of enterprise level billing for SaaS. So I'm assuming in the next couple of years, we're going to see a solution that actually does this and does it well, but we don't have one right now. So this is the state of affairs, guys. So until then, you just have to sort of do it yourself and do it with discipline, because eventually it's going to pay off. All right, take care, guys.